Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 105 in studio episodes of The Last Round. Thanks again for joining us wherever you are around the world. We appreciate it. Apple Podcast, Stitcher, all that stuff. I don't know. Like I told you, Mike, one day I'm going to say every single platform we're on. Boxing Social, Podcast, Spotify. I mean, what do we have? Maybe like 30 different ones that we're on? Something like that?
The new one, Amazon Music.
Good thinking. Good point. If you're an Amazon, enthusiast or something, we are now on their Amazon Music app or something like that. Amazon Podcast, Audible, or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think the app's called Audible, but it's Amazon Music essentially.
Yeah, it's an Amazon platform, so we are now on there as well. So usually we try to stay on top of that, but kind of jumping right into it off of a pretty passionate weekend, especially over here in Las Vegas. I know Mike yesterday was pretty happy or pretty passionate about this past Saturday's event. Just about all the outcomes and all the official decisions. Like, it was a pretty wild night. People are so mad, but like, hey, at least we're getting attention. When somebody like Joe Rogan. We were just talking about this right before we came on air. When somebody like who's got a pretty big platform and they're tweeting about boxing, especially a boxing card that's not really like that significant in terms of to casuals, that's a big deal. So hey, that's awesome. Regardless, it might be criticism, but oh well. But like I said, jumping right into it, fight reviews this past Saturday, the 14th of November from the Bubble at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas on regular ESPN over here in the United States. The main event, Terence Crawford improves to 37-0 with the fourth round stoppage over your fellow countryman, Mike. Kell Brook, the special one, and Crawford retains his WBO welterweight world title. First question, Mike, is Kell Brook still the special one?
No, definitely not. I didn't like his body language. Obviously stepping in there, I think most people thought, Terence Crawford was going to win. The only way Kell Brook, could really have won, if he managed to turn back Father Time, come back like he did a few years ago. He got in there on weight, looked good, probably won the first two rounds, maybe the first three rounds. And then as soon as, Terence Crawford kind of slipped it up into another gear, he caught him early on in that round. Had him stumbled against the ropes. I just didn't like his body language. He kind of, turned away, didn't want to obviously get hit again. The referee could have probably have stopped it the first time. He kind of looked a little bit out there. Terence Crawford just came back, and I think everybody says, once Crawford has you hurt, he probably is one of the best finishers out there.
Well, when Crawford turned southpaw is when Brook really started having those problems. Because when Crawford was orthodox, Brook was landing. I mean, I think it was Crawford's right eye started to get kind of have some swelling. Like, it was visible. It was only, the fight was only 4 rounds. So if he was doing that damage to that eye within like the first 4 rounds, I mean, that shows you something. He was connecting, he was precise, but when Crawford turned southpaw, that's when you can see Brook couldn't really figure it out. And then he gets caught with that, it was almost like a Triple G-esque jab. What would you call it? Like a straight, hard. I mean, that was pretty much what kind of tumbled him, right? I mean, or was it? Am I wrong?
Just like as Kell Brook kind of came forward, he just kind of caught him with a stiff, right hand, obviously from the southpaw stance,
right?
And that just kind of shook Brook up. And I think Brook afterwards was chatting to Terence Crawford behind the scenes, and he told him, he's like, it's just your timing. He's like, I just didn't see that coming. I don't know whether he was trying to play down the amount of power he had, but he was kind of emphasizing, how good Crawford's timing was.
Right.
So it's Crawford. Kell Brook was kind of very honest. He said, he's like, I've never been dropped like that before in sparring and in professional fights. So it just shows, how good Terence Crawford is. And I think everybody now just wants him to go on there and face the bigger and better names. The two best people probably on his resume at 147 have to be the two Brits, I would say, Kell Brook and Amir Khan, both probably over the hill. But, in terms of resume, they're still on there.
In terms of names or in terms of competition?
Just in terms of names, I think they're both kind of over the hill. I think, Amir Khan seemed to take the easy way out because he knew it was kind of slowly going downhill for him and he was probably going to get knocked out. Kell Brook, Crawford took him to school, really. Just as soon as he decided to up it, he got him out of there, even though Kell Brook, I can't remember the exact statistic, but he was, substantially connecting with Crawford more than anybody else. I think it was something like 36% of the punches he was throwing was connecting with Crawford, which was
he was landing on him. I mean, I mentioned,
I think it was like 16% higher than the average in most of Crawford other fights. So he kind of had solved that puzzle in the first couple of rounds. But like everybody says, I think Crawford is kind of like Lomachenko when he kind of slowly works you out. And then as he did, as soon as the fourth round came, he just slipped it up into fourth or fifth gear and, took him out of there.
No, you're right. And like you mentioned, Kell Brook was landing at a higher than average percentage against Crawford than, prior opponents of Crawford. Because I remember when they showed the first set of CompuBox stats, I think Brook had landed, I think 15 more punches or something like that, like overall for that round. And I was like, oh, wow. Or it might have been the first two rounds. I don't know when they showed it. But, I mean, like, if Brook had never had these issues with both of his eye sockets against Triple G, Errol Spence, he never had to have, like, surgery. I think they said it. He has, like, metal in there or something like that. Am I wrong? Right?
I believe so. Yeah, he has metal on the sides.
Right.
Where the bone is.
Right. So, like, I mean, I think you have to recognize that Brook still has skill. He does. Just based on those 4 rounds, if you exclude the stoppage, obviously, and how he got hurt and how it was stopped, he still has skill. I mean, it is still skill for him to remain a professional and keep boxing. Probably not, because in terms of the medical risk and all that stuff, he probably should consider hanging him up, from a medical standpoint. But think about, like, how would this fight have gone if they fought, let's just say, before the Triple G fight, maybe 3-4 years ago? How much different could it have been? What do you think if this fight was 4 years ago? How do you think it would go? Honestly,
it's kind of hard to say because of the Kell Brook, ever since beating Sean Porter, never really stepped up to that level and consistently fought, what we would class as A-class fighters. He kind of dropped down, didn't live the life outside of the ring. And, I think Eddie Hearn and people around him knew that. So that's why he was given, like your Jojo Dans, and other names like that, kind of like your B-level, C-level fighters. So it's it is kind of hard to say. I really rated Brook at that time. And I think other people have said they thought he was one of, if not the best welterweights, a few years back.
Right.
It's just not living that life outside of the ring where, your Terence Crawfords and other people do. And that's what separates the very best to those people that, coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, reiterating my opinion from a medical standpoint, and like you said, even when he got hit with that straight hard jab from Crawford, like you can tell he almost fell through the ropes. If there was fans there, he would have landed on their laps, and then, right after that, like Crawford just jumps on him. Like you said, he's one of the best finishers in the game, if not the best finisher. I mean, you could just see it in Brook's eyes, like in his body language. Like you said, he just, he's not the same. Like, he can't take that punishment. And when you're trying to fight at that level with those type of guys, those marquee names, that marquee talent, that's all you're going to face. That's the type of punishment you're going to have to take. Like, and obviously Brook has showed that he still has some skill, but he just can't take those highly competitive shots from these marquee talents. He just can't, So like the only way I think if he continues his boxing career is if he fights lower level guys just to kind of keep busy. But I mean, he from protecting like his injuries as he's had in the past, especially his face, his eye sockets, he needs to stay away from, the Crawfords again, the Porters, the Danny Garcias, all those high marquee names, but before we kind of dive into like Crawford and what his situation is now going forward and, contract wise and everything, is a fight of the century going to happen now since Brook lost? Are we going to get, Mike, and you tell me, Amir Khan versus Kell Brook? Tell me.
I think if Kell Brook wants to carry on fighting and get, like at the last 1 or 2 paydays, I think the Amir Khan fight is the only fight that really makes sense. I'm sure that if they stick it on pay-per-view, it'll probably still attract, viewers, because that's just unfortunately what the boxing fans are like. As much as we trash, certain pay-per-views, we always end up paying it because there's nothing else to do on a weekend. We end up paying it and we'll probably watch it. And, touching on, like we said, it kind of, the body language looked like, Kell didn't really like being hit anymore, whether that's just something, mentally because of the fact of the big injuries he had against, Triple G and Errol Spence. Luckily, fighting Khan's not the biggest puncher.
Right.
It's more of kind of referee stoppages from, consistent blows than Khan really having that one punch knockout power.
Right.
There's just genuine spite between them. So the build-up would be good. And I'm sure it would be a good payday for Amir and for Kell if they actually want to settle it. If not, it depends on, does Kell want to drop down to stuff like British level? People have always talked about Kell Brook fighting Liam Smith because of the sparring sessions he had. I think it was when Kell was training for the Triple G fight. I believe him and Liam Smith had some, pay-per-view worthy sparring is what everybody says.
Damn.
So it really depends. Everyone says that Kell financially is set after getting a huge payday against Triple G. I believe the payday Mike Coppinger put out was $2 million for last night. And it's more really just he sticks around because, he loves boxing. He was
Right.
hoping he could, do something legendary, trying to set some legacy by beating Terence Crawford. So does he want to drop down and fight Amir Khan for no belt? Well,
Right.
actually, the WBC probably would put a belt on the line for that. Or does he want to drop down to British level and fight Liam Smith? Really the ball's in Kell's court now is, what does he want to do? Where does he want to go from here?
No, you're right. I mean, I don't know. He really needs to consider his next move because, it's not the risk of these injuries. I mean, it'd be one thing if if it was his hand or like a shoulder thing or something. Like it's still bad, but like his sensitive area is his freaking face. It's his face. Like nobody wants to have injuries there. Like it's like one of the worst places you could have it. And he gets punched in the face professionally. Like I just don't see any decent outcome in the future where that, if he keeps fighting and especially keeps fighting guys who are, obviously marquee talents or, decent enough to cause pretty good damage, I don't see how he doesn't have like long-term effects from these injuries. Like it's going to be bad, I mean, I don't know, but maybe he's going to hang it up. I think he said in one of the interviews after this past Saturday's fights that I think he was like acknowledging, he's like, oh, I kind of have to look at, like, it was kind of a way where he was like kind of saying, maybe I should look into hanging him up, but who knows? I mean, they might, like you said, you might throw Amir Khan in there and be like, let's just give it to the people. Let's do it. But who knows? But I also think that kind of irritated me when they were interviewing Brook at the end, the ESPN guys. Like, you got to give it to Brook. He was total class. Like, he was like, yeah, this guy, he gave Crawford the props. He was like, yeah, I just got I stopped. Like he total class didn't make. I didn't hear any excuses. He might have, but I don't think he did. The ESPN team was literally trying to get Brook to say that Crawford was better than Spence, because obviously Brook fought both of them. And, if you want to look at it, from this angle, like, well, Crawford stopped, Brook way before Spence did. It took Spence like 10 rounds or whatever it was, 10, 11 rounds. It's just like, come on, man, you can't make that comparison. You can't make that comparison. Like those were different Kell Brooks, but they were trying to get Kell Brook. They kept asking him like, "Oh, about Errol Spence." It took Spence 11 rounds to stop you, and Crawford stopped you in 4. It's just like, and he didn't say anything about it. He was just like, he just kind of danced around it. But they were really trying to get him to talk about Spence. You gotta give it to Bob Arum and Top Rank. They're really trying to turn up the heat now in the media from a PR standpoint on PBC and Errol Spence and all these other guys, because that's their only way to get these fights for Crawford. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, it was kind of funny and kind of irritating at the time. Like he kept trying to reword it, trying to get Kell Brook to say something negative, about Errol Spence, or say that Crawford was the heavier puncher. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of funny as well that Bob Arum and Terence Crawford were getting interviewed, and Bob Arum was talking about like how Spence doesn't want it, blah blah blah, and then they turned to Crawford, and Crawford was like, "Yeah, I want Manny Pacquiao next."
Where did that come from?
After they were trying to push the Errol Spence narrative so much, he turns around and says he wants Pacquiao. But at the end of the day, I think as boxing fan, we'd all want to see Spence. I would take Pacquiao. I would take Danny Garcia. Any of those, I think, from the PBC side is what we want to see Crawford fight. We don't want to see him in with another Chris Van Heerden or someone else that the Top Rank decide to dig up because they can't get anybody else. If he gets to like me and you were texting the other day, if he gets to next summer, I think it's October 2021, and that's when Crawford's contract runs out. He may have to leave. He may have to go over to PBC just to get those fights.
Right. I mean, I think even if his contract runs out and they offer him an extension, which obviously they're going to try if it comes to that point, he shouldn't be signing any long-term contracts with, especially with Top Rank, because I mean, if he's like, okay, I'm going to sign with you guys for 2 fights, or it's a 1-fight deal or something like that. I mean, he's already made a ton of money. Like it's not like he needs the money, but if he signs another long-term deal with them, like that, I mean, what is that going to tell you? Like, I think Steve Kim tweeted, and he made a pretty good point. He was just like, I think it's a mutual parting of ways would probably be the best course of action for both parties, because, Crawford needs to fight these guys for his legacy. Like, people know that he's good, but he's about to be 35. He's going to be 35 next year. He's going to be 35 years old.
The problem I think you have is when you see him in interviews, he genuinely seems to not care about, the names on his resume. He seems to think, I did enough at 140. I've got a belt at 147. Pretty much, like Bomac and everybody else that's in that kind of, Bomac and Terence Crawford stable, Steve Nelson, Jamel Herring, all the up-and-coming guys that Crawford has, they're all with Top Rank.
Right.
So I do wonder whether that's kind of come into play. And Crawford's going to, being, a guy that's come up from the streets and stuff like that, I think, like respect and loyalty is something, kind of big to him. And is he going to side with Top Rank in the fact that Top Rank kind of made him who he is?
I don't see him. I could be wrong. I mean, if they were talking about, he said he wanted Pacquiao, and then I think Bob Arum or even Crawford had said that there was a deal in place before COVID, supposedly. I mean, there was never anything official reported for that. That's just them saying that. Like, we know how top rank is, how Bob Arum is. He kind of just says things.
Yeah.
Like, just like, oh yeah, well, I'm trying, or I made an offer, blah blah. Like, okay, He's the definition of a promoter. He really is. But he mentions like that they're going to try to make the Manny Pacquiao fight. That Pacquiao's guarantee was already there. That wasn't an issue. It was
23 million, I think.
$23 million. Like, it was wild. That wasn't an issue. Like that they had to go to like Saudi Arabia because that's where that's where the money's at. You know, supposedly that was like, and it's funny that Bob Arum was saying like he was just like, yeah, he's like everything was already in place, and then the health minister of Saudi Arabia or that area said, hey, you know, we should hold off because I don't know if we're going to be able to have it with fans because everything is going on, and so like they kind of put a stop to it. But it's just like, you know, was any of that reported? Like I never saw any reputable reporting about like, hey, Pacquiao and Crawford are in advanced talks or this and that. Like, you know, like it was all Bob Arum.
And the UFC's been in Saudi Arabia the whole of the summer.
Right. Yeah. That's what I thought too. I was just like, what? I was like, why wouldn't I was just you would think something would leak, but maybe not. But I don't know. I don't see a Pacquiao fight. I think like I said, like they're just putting media pressure, PR pressure on the PBC fighters, Pacquiao, Spence, all those guys, the Heyman stable, if you will. They're trying to put media pressure on them by saying like, oh, they don't want to fight Terence. I mean, like Bob Arum, he says it in interviews. He said it last night when he was standing there next to Terence Crawford. He was like, Spence doesn't want to fight Terence because he knows that Terence will beat him. You know, pretty much calling him like, oh, you're a chicken. Like, because you don't want to fight my guy because, you know, like pretty much trying to shame them into fighting him. But which might work. It might work. I mean, you know, that when's the last time Top Rank or Bob Arum have been this adamant the last couple months about pressure for those fighters? Because they know, like, okay, they've hit a wall with Terence Crawford. Like, there's nobody else for him to fight where they can get away with it. Who else could they fight? I mean, realistically, let's just say you are Bob Arum, Mike. Let's play a hypothetical here. You are Bob Arum, and you're going to have to give us your Bob Arum voice too. And you're trying to make these PBC fights for Crawford and it doesn't work. Realistically, who could you put Crawford in if you still have to keep him busy if he doesn't get any of these other marquee names?
The problem is they're all tied up with, you know, the PBC. You're looking at people like Jesse Vargas, Josecito Lopez. That's two people that aren't with the PBC. I don't know, because that whole division is really kind of tied up with those guys. And obviously the British people have been, obviously, he's already taken out Amir Khan, obviously fought Kell Brook, Mo Hooker, maybe like Regis Prograis is out now with the PBC as well. They're kind of really stuck. And I think, like we touched on, I think the fact that they come into the last 11 months or so of Crawford's contract, right, I think is the reason Bob Arum is now putting the pressure on the PBC to make those fights. But because now it's kind of well known that Crawford's contract's coming to an end, is the PBC going to say, well, no, we'll wait and we'll sign him?
That's exactly what they're going to do. That's exactly what they're going to do. They know, like, you know, everything's already out in the open that his contract is supposedly up, and now that there's pressure or something, I don't know. Who knows if this is even all, whatever the hell's going on? You know, only certain intimate parties know. But you're right. If Heyman is a smart enough guy, which obviously he is, that's exactly what he's going to do. He's like, why am I going to give him a chance? This is how he's going to look at it. Why am I going to put one of my guys, Spence, you know, Porter, especially Spence with 2 titles, why am I going to put him in there against Crawford, share a piece of the financial pie with Top Rank, and risk my guy losing and them taking the belts, and then he resigns a long-term deal with Top Rank, and then they have the titles, and then they're in power? Why wouldn't I just wait for Crawford's contract to expire, and then I sign him?
How do you think it looks on Crawford if he does sign? If he sits there and he says, you know what, loyalty and stuff like that means a lot to me. Top Rank made me. I get along with ESPN. Bomac has a good position with ESPN. You know, he's always playing table tennis with like Mikey Williams. Gets along really well with Ponce, the female announcer.
Christina Puncher.
Yeah, they all, you know, he gets along really well with all those guys. You can see behind the scenes, kind of Top Rank are a very big family. And what happens if he's just like, you know what, it's better the devil, you know. You know, I'm loved here. I'm the number one guy here. I'm the big fish in the small pond. Why do I need to go to PBC?
See, that'd be like that. Then you definitely know that he doesn't care about his legacy. Like I, for one, at this point, if he retired today, he's not a Hall of Famer. He's not. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. You need the names on your resume. You need it. He's 37-0. He has a talent. Nobody disagrees that he doesn't have talent. Crawford is a great fighter, but like you need the names on your resume. You need the names on your resume, like you do. You need to fight those people. Like, and you're going to get criticized. And if he resigns with ESPN or Top Rank, like you said, like the devil you know, and he takes this criticism, he keeps fighting these low-level guys because obviously the PBC guys are just box him out for the rest of his career, then he has no place to whine and complain about the criticism, about his legacy, about his resume. Like, from that point forward. You can't, because you decided, like, oh, well, yeah, I wanted to sign with that. It's like, you have no reason to complain and be like, oh, I can't get these big fights. And be like, he got that criticism last time when he re-signed. If he does it again, then you know, like, he doesn't care. Like, he doesn't. But, like, I don't know. I don't see any realistic reason for him to re-sign with Top Rank. I don't. I really don't. Like, all the best guys are at PBC. Look at that. I mean, they like you just mentioned. You mentioned Mo Hooker and who's the other guy? I just lost.
Jesse Vargas.
No. Mo Hooker, and they took him from DAZN.
Ramirez.
No. Mo Hooker. We just talked about him. Damn, Mike.
Regis Prograis.
The PBC just picked them up. Regis Prograis and Mo Hooker, and they're pretty much welterweights. You know, they've already said they're going to fight at welterweight, or they're right there on the cusp or something like that. Like, because I mean, they all see it. Like, that's where all the action's at. That's where all the money fights are at. You know, it's not only the money fights, but your legacy fights. These guys are the best in the division, and they're all under this banner. Like, you know, like what? I mean, look at Spence. Like, I don't think anybody would have gave Spence when after he got the car crash. Everybody wants to see how he does ever since that car crash. That was a bad car crash, and people thought, oh, he's going to get like a tune-up fight because of his injuries, like, you know. And people were giving him a pass, like, hey, you know, like he just needs like a rhythm fight to get back into it. And then he comes and he makes his first fight back against Danny Garcia. Like, holy crap!
And I also don't see Crawford getting the Pacquiao fight, because as far as we knew, it was supposed to be Mikey Garcia, Manny Pacquiao, over in, you know, Dubai, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, somewhere like that, because that was kind of the deal they had with DAZN. He had that, you know, $6 or $7 million payday to fight Jesse Vargas. You know, if he liked it, he had the option of a second fight with Eddie Hearn and DAZN. And everybody chatting to Robert Garcia's gym and all those guys, it seemed to be it was going to be Manny Pacquiao until the coronavirus hit. And I'm pretty sure Mikey Garcia, Manny Pacquiao draws a substantially bigger crowd than Manny Pacquiao, Terence Crawford.
You got to look at it this way. For Pacquiao, when he fought Thurman, I think he said in interviews, like, Thurman's a big guy. Pacquiao's not really like a 147 pounder. He's like a 140, 135. He's a small guy. And when he fought Thurman, he beat Thurman, but like Pacquiao said in interviews, like, he's a strong guy. Those types of interviews that Pacquiao's given over the years, where he mentioned in post-fight interviews, where he mentioned that his opponent was like really strong and they were like big guys. There was only the ones that I can remember. It was Thurman and Antonio Margarito that they punched really hard, and he was just like, yeah, these guys are big. Like, these guys at 147 are bigger than like, I mean, they're bigger than like a Mayweather, you know, in terms of size, in terms of strength. I mean, look at Porter. Porter was fighting like, I think at 175 or something like that in the amateurs or something like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
And now he's fighting at 147. Like, Spence is pretty much 154 to 160 pounder. You know, he's a strong kid. Danny Garcia, like, you know, he's got like that secret power with those overhand rights and stuff like that, where he's like those no look punches. I mean, I don't see Pacquiao taking any of these risks with these bigger guys, even though he can obviously show that he can still fight at like 42 years old and he's still a draw and he can still be competitive. But he's not going to be like, why am I going to get in there with somebody like Spence or Terence Crawford? Like, why? Like, Pacquiao's legacy's his legacy's been set for years. Why does he need that? He doesn't need that. He's gonna go after Mikey Garcia likely because Mikey Garcia is Mexican. He brings the fans, and Mikey Garcia is a small guy like him. Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't you go for that? Like,
no, exactly. You know, Mikey doesn't have that one punch knockout power. Like you said, he's done the same thing that Pacquiao done. He's come up from, you know, 130, 135, 140. So he's naturally a smaller guy. And like you touched on, he's got those legions of, you know, Hispanic fans. So Pacquiao really is in kind of a very sweet place that he can just kind of pick the big fights with the most money, with the least chance of him, you know, probably getting hurt.
Right.
Until he retires.
Right. I mean, and you know, look at how they call him out, like, because you'll make the most money with him, but then also like Crawford calling out Pacquiao is because like Pacquiao has that regular WBA or is it, I don't know what the hell belt it is, but he has some type of alternate title at 147 pounds, and so Crawford and Top Rank are thinking, well, if Crawford fights him, he takes that title. And then he goes after Errol Spence, and it's a type of like unification, like for the WBO and the regular WBA or whatever the hell it is. Like, I don't know. I don't see realistically. I don't see it. Like, if it hasn't changed by now, like Crawford will not be getting any of the PBC guys or Pacquiao. I don't see it. I just don't. And Pacquiao left Top Rank. You don't think Top Rank and Pacquiao like left on bad terms? Like, you know, nobody likes when you leave their company. Like they're going to have bad taste and they're going to keep a bad taste in their mouth. Like, why would Pacquiao want to return the favor? You know, like, oh yeah, I'm going to work with Bob Arum again and have them take a share of my profits that I bring in because of my name. Like, I don't see it. I don't. I think, you know, Crawford's going to sit out in the summer. You're going to start hearing like. Look, in the next couple months, you're going to start hearing Bob Arum and Top Rank turn up the heat. Oh, we made an offer to Pacquiao, $23 million, something like that. And Pacquiao just hasn't responded. You know, he doesn't want to fight Terence. They're going to make it seem like it's that side. That's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do. Like, you know, but I mean, I think we talked about it. It might've been Saturday or just before. Terence Crawford needs like a manager. Like he needs like, you know, look at MTK, like they're scooping up everybody, you know, like he needs somebody to like really be like the middleman between his interests and Top Rank, like legitimately like to be there and be like, nah, man, this is what's going to happen. Or this is where we're going and we're going to make this happen. Like that's what he needs. You know, I mean, I don't know. Like it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this all plays out. But you know, if it hasn't changed by this time, by this point, I don't see anything changing in the next year. I don't. What I mean,
sadly, yeah, I think I could see Crawford just kind of staying where he is because he likes Top Rank, and then unfortunately just kind of using that excuse, like, hey, we've put offers in to PBC, and you know, it's not us. We're trying to make the fights. And
right.
Kind of just the same old thing. And then unfortunately, he gets older.
I'm telling you, dude, like I Crawford is a great fighter. Like nobody's denying that. If I was Top Rank, I would have just said, look, all right, Heyman, we'll send him over to Showtime. We'll send him over to Fox. You know, let our guy fight your guy for the title or something like that. Like Crawford's one of those guys that you should have that much confidence in to let that guy go over there and take their belts and bring them back to ESPN. Like, imagine that. Imagine people would be like, holy crap. He went over there and like Jose Ramirez, he went to DAZN. Eddie Hearn put up the money. He went to DAZN for a unification matchup with Mo Hooker, and he beat Mo Hooker, and he brought the titles back. That's what they should have done with Crawford. But I mean, I get it. There's like broadcasting rights, and ESPN probably didn't want to let it happen, and whatever. But I mean, honestly, that's what you had to do. Like the risk versus reward. And Crawford's talents are that great that I would have total confidence. Let him go over there because he has a great chance of winning. A great chance of winning and bringing those belts back and keeping them on ESPN. But I don't know, man. We'll see how it all plays out. But, Top Rank and all them, they're trying to speak everything into existence with Pacquiao, Spence. Let's see how it all pans out, man. Maybe Canelo just left his zone and Golden Boy. Is Crawford next? Who knows? Crawford could be next in the next year or so. Moving on, co-main event. This was definitely your favorite fight of the night, Mike. Joshua Franco and Andrew Moloney in their rematch. Fight to a no decision after Franco's right, I believe it was right eye, closed shut. He couldn't see out of it. It was like he had no eye. All right, Mike. I'm going to give you the floor because I know you're very passionate about this. So let us know what you think about this.
In my humble opinion, I thought it was the jab. I thought he kind of caught him with more of the thumb. And maybe the stitching or whatever around the area was kind of what made it look like it swelled up as, quickly and as fat as it did. Then obviously after, Moloney saw that, he just went to town on that, kept jabbing at it, making it bigger, obviously thinking that, he was going to get the stoppage, later down the line. Obviously, the end of the second round, they decided, his eye wasn't good enough to continue. He was going to go to the new VAR system, the new video system that they had, and took 26 minutes to look at a 3-minute round, and then, in my opinion, still got it wrong. I just thought it was silly, the fact that they've got two 60, 70, 80-year-old guys trying to, work this new contraption that they have for the video playback when, most guys of that age can't even work their cell phones. So right. I understood that. In an interview afterwards, I think it was with Kevin Naioli, he got Bob Bennett, who's the head of the Nevada Athletic Commission, and he the way that he emphasized it was that the only way they were going to overturn the referee's decision, who had called it a headbutt, was that if they had 100% video evidence which showed it wasn't a headbutt, and because they weren't 100% convinced it was that punch, was the reason that they just went with the referee and went with the no decision.
So what do you think about that? Because I think that's a devil's advocate point. Like, in terms of nothing's ever going to be 100% fair, or I mean, all the time. There's going to be issues like this. It's boxing, MMA. They intertwine like that. So for something like that statement that Bob Bennett made, where he's like, look, this is a policy, and we can't definitively say that it happened because of this or that. How do you respond to that? In terms of in terms of fairness for that process.
I understand that. Obviously, if you're going to overturn a decision, you want to be 100% correct, because you're obviously going against what the referee said during the fight. But I thought they took long enough in, the 26, 27 minutes that they took to hopefully get to the right decision. And even though there's a couple of, I think maybe 2 incidences that they suspect the headbutt happened, to me it looked more of some infighting, and, his head was kind of on his his shoulder area, around that. I didn't think there was anything that kind of looked like a huge headbutt that would have, caused the eye to swell up like that. And normally you get kind of a headbutt, and then in slow motion you'd get like blood dripping from it, where this seemed more of a punch because there was swelling, but there was no cut. Normally when you hit, head to head, it opens up, and then as soon as they pull away, there's blood dripping down, blah blah blah. So it's hard to say. No,
you're right. I mean, when I was watching the ESPN broadcast, they were like focusing a lot, and the commentary team was like, "Oh, it was from the jabs," and I was just like, "Man, I think that's right." And then obviously boxing Twitter's puts their opinion, and majority of the people were like, "Oh, this was corrupt." They were pissed off at that how it ended. And then like some people started posting like videos and clips and pictures of like, well, there was a headbutt right here, and like I started seeing it, and there was one instance where, and people are saying it was like the opposite eye, but like it looked like it would look like it was the closed eye side. I watched it like 10 times. I was like, but there was one instance I think where Frank was coming in, I think with like a right hand or something, and then like he's kind of bent over a little bit, and then Moloney kind of like squats and then comes in with like the side, I think, of his left side of his head or something, and he does hit his facial area. So when I saw that clip, I was like, oh shit. I was like, well, could this? But I was trying to figure out was this before? Because you couldn't really see his eye from that angle, so I couldn't tell if it was like swollen or not. But like, I mean, I think what made it really worse is that they, like you said, they took so long. They took so long where like it made them look like, damn, like is something wrong, and like they're just trying to figure out how to go about it, like how to mask the decision or how to, like I did that because that was like it was like 30 minutes people were waiting, right?
I think a better system would be you have a dedicated referee ringside who literally goes through and looks at those things, during the fight, not necessarily just when called upon. If there's something that the referee, because the referee calls it, the referee will go and say like, hey, that injury is a headbutt. That injury is, due to whatever. So people know on the side, and I think it would be good if they did that. And I didn't like the way that they had to keep calling back to ESPN. Hey, replay this section. Why don't they have like something there? Yeah. Why don't they have a feed which they can navigate themselves?
Yeah, that was weird.
Instead of calling back to ESPN, hey, can you put it back to the 1 minute in the first round or the second minute in the first round? They should be able to rewind and fast forward it themselves. Have somebody that's trained there, and that's their job, and they can, either show the referee or the ARA referee, and, they can navigate it themselves and come to some kind of conclusion instead of, taking, that long, because it was just a bit of a stain again on boxing that it took nearly 30 minutes. They had to wait for the main event. We also had to wait 30 minutes, 45 minutes for the college football to finish. And, it was just a bit of a shit show. It gave us something to talk about on the podcast.
Of course.
It was kind of just, a bit of a shit show altogether.
What recent fight did they use instant replay? And within like 30, 40 seconds, like they figured it out and they switched it and they kept going. It was like very, very quick and accurate.
Top Rank, it was
right. It was top
Pedraza and somebody else where they called it they either called it a slip and it was a knockdown, or they called it a knockdown and it was a slip, and it was
something like that.
Pedraza against somebody.
Right. And like I remember when that happened, people were like, "Oh my God, this is great!" It was quick, accurate, and they kept the action moving. Yeah. And then right here, when they went to the replay, I was just like, "Oh, okay, they'll figure it out in like 2 minutes." That's what I thought, because that's the first thing I remembered. I was like, "Well, they did instant replay last time, and it was pretty quick." So I was just like, they should be able to figure it out pretty fast. And then 1 minute goes by, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. I'm like, "Oh no, what are they trying to figure out?" I think like going back to Bob Bennett's comments, like I think like he said, like he was just like they couldn't definitively say one way or the other. Like I know people are passionate and up in arms about like, oh, this and that. I noticed the trend, at least online, people started getting a lot more passionate and calling corruption and this and that after Moloney gave his post-fight interview, because he was very emotional. Like he almost wanted to cry. So it pulled at people's heartstrings, So people started like, yeah, they robbed him and stuff like that. Like, yeah, he might have been at the wrong side of the stick, like, but there was, at least from that clip I saw, there was some type of contact between heads. Like, even though, like, it did look like it was a jab, but like, I don't know. Like, I
think it was looking at Twitter and stuff like that. And because ESPN kind of sided with Moloney, they were all kind of stuck on that it was a jab. I think more people are siding with Moloney. When you've got people like you touched on, Joe Rogan, one of the biggest kind of social media celebrities in the world, commenting on a fight, kind of, saying how bad the decision was. I think the only saving grace is because it's so controversial, even if they'd have given it to Moloney, they probably would have had a third fight anyway, due to the fact of, like you touched on, it wasn't a 100% like, hey, it was definitely the jab. I think it was, but, there is a lot of people that seem to say that they think it was, a headbutt. But the only problem is Moloney going to come in peak condition again, because for those first 2 rounds, he was boxing Franco's head off. He looked completely different to the first fight. I think he realized not to get, kind of drawn into a very close, gunslinging fight in the middle of the ring, which kind of, goes to Franco's kind of style, where he was keeping on his toes, just boxing from the outside, and kind of gave him a boxing lesson for those first 2 rounds.
Right.
But I obviously spoke to, Tony Torres, the manager, this morning, and he says, Top Rank have options on that fight. And he also believes that the WBA will also, order a third fight. So, which is a saving grace for both of them. And I think they both deserve that. Franco's been on the show, Moloney's been on the show. You can't 100% say what it is. I think it was a punch. You kind of side more on, you think it was a head clash.
I think like I haven't really like dissected it. I was trying to follow it and see what people's opinions and stuff like that. Obviously, the majority of the opinion people were just passionate and like saying it was corruption. Moloney got robbed and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously ESPN was pushing, showing like it was a jab, this and that, and then other people were, whatever, like following the narrative, which it probably was a jab, but in terms of like fairness for when you're as a commission, like regardless of the issues that happens, like going back to Bob Bennett's statement where he's just like, look, like we didn't have any definitive proof, like there was enough of a gray area where it's just like, well, like we can't. It's hard to make a one-sided decision because we don't have a black and white answer. If there was no, I thought before I saw that clip on Twitter where like they did kind of connect on their heads, like Moloney kind of comes in and it just seems like it was just kind of like a weird, coming of heads like that. I didn't think there was any type of headbutt or any type of contact like that. I thought, oh yeah, I was like, he was just jabbing his eye off. That's what I thought. And then I saw that, I was like, oh shit. I was like, well, that kind of gives like some type of security layer to the commission. Like, I mean, like, I don't know. I just thought it was ironic too, because people were like, oh, it's corrupt and blah, blah, this and that. It's corrupt to make it a no decision or a no contest for the guy who's not backed by the broadcaster and the promoter. Like, what the hell is that?
The Golden Boy fighter?
Yeah. I thought, like normally we see, I mean, we've seen enough fights and we're going to see more fights. Normally we see where the A-side fighter, whoever is fighting for that main promoter, will get the decision or will get, the benefit of the doubt,
What do you think on what Bob Arum said with the interview? I think it was with Sean Zittel from Fight Hype about, complaining about the decision and then saying, let's get the fuck out of let's get the fuck out of Las Vegas. Obviously,
that doesn't mean anything.
Bob says a lot of things. You think we'll still see all of the fights based in Vegas since Top Rank's based in Vegas?
That doesn't mean anything. People who take Bob Arum seriously on things like, what was that quote he said back in the day? Like,
oh, yesterday I was lying, today I'm telling the truth.
Yeah. So like he knows he's a lawyer, and he's been in the promoting business, a boxing promotion business for most of a lot of his life, most of his life. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. Like, I remember, he was when like a year or two ago, some YouTube reporters or some of that boxing channels were asking him his opinion on like politics. I think at that time, Donald Trump was tweeting about boxing or something. I don't know. And Bob Arum was like saying, Donald Trump sucks, whatever, this and that. He's gonna do whatever. And then like sometime later, they asked him again, and then he said, he's like, oh, I don't want Bernie Sanders. He's like, Bernie Sanders is gonna mess up our country. He's like, I'd vote for Trump over Bernie Sanders. And people were like, what the hell? What? I remember that. Like the guy says all this shit. He's all over the place. He's like, it's wild, but he knows the system. He knows how to play the system. Like he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He wouldn't have been as successful as he's been in this game if he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows that people see what he says, and he's just like, yeah, sometimes I talk out of my ass. He knows that. But he's got a multi-million-dollar company, and arguably, especially as you're raising your profile and they give you opportunities on big platforms, Top Rank is arguably probably the best one in terms of that.
It's funny because Eddie Hearn gets a lot of slack for, maybe saying one thing and doing something else where, Bob Arum's probably the worst for that. Yeah.
Yeah. But Bob Arum's, it's like, what did Eddie Hearn tell us when he was on the show last year in Phoenix, is that when he came in onto the scene, people were like, oh yeah, Eddie Hearn, take it to Frank Warren and blah, blah, blah. And then when he started taking over and really gained a major piece of the pie, people started like slagging him off and going after him. Like, oh, you suck, Eddie. You're bad for the sport. Like, I think for Bob Arum is like that crazy grandpa or that crazy uncle you have, and he's been around for so long that people are just like, yeah, you know what? Like, I respect the guy just because like he kind of knows the business, he knows what's going on, and his quotes are so crazy and like they're so entertaining to an extent that people are just like, oh, there goes Bob Arum again. It's just like people give him a pass in a way, So and Eddie Hearn is like that, like he's still that young guy who he's still one of the main promoters in the world, but like, he's not there yet. So, it's just Bob Arum's just got that crazy grandpa complexion. So people are just like, there goes Bob Arum again. Well, Eddie Hearn is just like, he's a tall guy, 6'5", whatever. And like, wears all these suits and stuff like that. And, comes out with a book, a memoir or whatever the hell. Like, so people are like, forget this guy. Like, so it's just, people are just hating. That's what it is. But whatever, it's cool. It is what it is. But I think, like you said, like, there's going to be a third fight. Even if it was after I think, is it 4 or 5 rounds where it goes to the scorecards? Is it 4 or 5? 4?
Yeah.
Even if it was after 4 rounds and it went to scorecards and let's just say Moloney won or whatever, like there would be a third fight. There would be. Like there's going to be a third fight. There's no way. It's not like they have too many options at that weight class.
That's his second trilogy.
Oh yeah, Franco? Because he was with
Negrete.
Yeah. It's crazy, huh? Hey, but it's cool though. It's good though because like it gives you something to do at that weight. Like you said, like we talked about the weight class. I mean, Chocolatito is probably like the most significant name, right?
And I think a lot of those guys are going to kind of be taken up with fighting each other. The top guys at that weight category. Your Chocolatito, Estrada, and all those guys are probably going to do a little round robin. So Moloney and Franco having a third fight,
right? Yeah. I mean, they're going to fight again. They're going to fight again. If people like, and then hopefully there's nothing controversial like that happens in the third fight. Hopefully it it is what it is, but people are just like, oh, this is why people leave boxing and blah, blah, blah. Like, look, man, I could see a lot of people especially because Joe Rogan kind of tweeted about it. There was a lot of casual fans who jumped in because I saw like a lot of messages or tweets and stuff like that. Hey, I'm not a hardcore boxing fan, but I was watching this or I looked into this and what's this guy, or is this really a bad decision? Like, I saw a lot of people with tweets like that or messages like that. I mean, which makes sense when somebody famous kind of puts light on a subject. A lot of people were like, "Oh, well, what does he talk about? I'm going to go look into it." Like, I think you could agree. I think you could agree with me that we've been covering the sport for so long and we've been watching it for so long that like we've seen the worst of what the sport has to offer in terms of decisions, in terms of question marks, in terms of if you want to call it corruption. So that's why I'm just like I've seen worse than that. If people are all up in arms about that, like what is going to change? What is going to change? Stuff like that is always happening. And like what, and the people are like, oh, I'm going to boycott boxing, or I'm going to do this, or this needs to change. What's really going to change? What's really going to change? Realistic.
It's not going to change. That old saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity. How many times is that little clip of the fight with the suspected headbutts? How often is that going to get played? How many eyes are going to see that? Because how many different people retweeted it? You got Joe Rogan retweeting it and stuff like that. And, what was it, 4 or 5 years after it should have been done, the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight, how many people were like, oh, I'm not going to pay for that. It's going to be trash. Biggest pay-per-view of all time.
Right. Exactly. So there you go. I don't know. They're going to fight again, though. Like, I'd be very surprised if they don't, but they will. I'm like,
he'll get ordered.
Yeah. They're going to fight again, and then hopefully the third matchup, they'll figure it out, but whatever. But hopefully Franco's okay, because that eye looked pretty nasty. Looked very, very nasty. Moving on. Joshua Greer. This was, I think this was on ESPN Plus, right? Joshua Greer Jr. and Edwin Rodriguez fight to a majority draw. And this was so there was only 3 fights for the whole card?
No, I just took on the 3 main ones because I knew we were going to spend a lot of time talking about Crawford and then also the Franco.
Okay. So did you catch this one? I didn't catch this one. If you did, what'd you think?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of a good fight for Josh Greer to come back after, having the loss against Planner last year. Maybe a little bit too tough because obviously it looked like he kind of changed his style. He changed his hair. He stopped bringing out, the night pillow with him after, taking that loss. Kind of odd to see Shakur Stevenson in his corner as his chief.
That was weird, huh? I saw stuff on Twitter about that. I didn't watch the fight, but I saw stuff on Twitter about that.
But to be fair to him, he actually gave some really good technical advice towards Greer. Very close. There's a lot of rounds which were kind of very hard to try and work out who'd won them. So I wasn't really too surprised. It was a draw. I think maybe Greer should drop down to come back up. I think if he's going to go back out there and correct a lot of the things that he was doing wrong, because when he had that night persona, when he was bringing out the pillow, he kind of headhunted a lot. In this fight, you could see that they kind of told him, like, hey, you need to go to the body more. So he was kind of working to the body, and you could hear Shakur telling him, like, you're putting money in the bank, work to the body. It's going to tire him out. And maybe it was Edwin Rodriguez was a little bit too hard whilst he was still trying to work out kind of his new style under the new trainer.
Right.
So I think maybe step back down, get used to that new, got Kate Karoma and Shakur in his corner, and then work back up. So.
Yeah, that whole Shakur Stevenson in his corner, I was just like, where the hell did that come from? That was very interesting to see. That was very interesting to see.
Well, Shakur's been working with Jorge Capetillo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Does Shakur live in Vegas now?
Yeah.
He does, right? He moved.
Yeah, he's been in Vegas. I don't know whether it's just for during the coronavirus or what, because so he's close to the top rank bubble. But
right.
He's been working out with Jorge Capetillo's gym, and Jorge's been working with Kell Brook, Chavez, Andrew Ruiz. So ever since he had Tyson Fury in camp, he's taken it to another level.
Stevenson's from where originally?
It's Ohio.
Is it Ohio?
I think it's Ohio, yeah.
Like where Broner's from, around there? Cincinnati or something like that?
I think he's from, around there.
Right there? Oh, okay. I mean, if he really moved to Vegas, like, fair play to him, because, like, that shows that he's like if he's serious, or maybe he's there because of the COVID thing, he just wants to be close to the bubble. Who knows? But that's something that, Tank Davis needs to do.
I think he's grown up a lot. I thought in the interviews that he gave, during the fight, and then some of the stuff that he now puts on social media, he seems to have grown up. There's obviously he had that trouble. Remember when he had that fight in like a parking structure where him and some of the guys got into a scrap.
Right.
He seems to have grown up a lot since then.
I think the difference is that Top Rank, Bob Arum and those guys, like, because after that issue with when he got in a fight where he, like, I think he hit a girl, or it was a bunch of people or something like that, some security surveillance footage or something like that, like a gas station. I don't know what the hell it was. That Bob Arum and the Top Rank brass brought him in, and they're just like, look, if you want to keep doing this shit, you're going to ruin yourself, but you cannot do that. Like, they put their foot down. Like, whereas like Tank Davis, who is obviously a great fighter, like, I think that, and you tell me if I'm wrong here in this analogy or not, but do you think that Tank Davis is more like friends with Leonard Ellerbe, Floyd Mayweather, like his team, like that, instead of like, yeah, those are my promoters, like these are my management, or these are my people, like, who will guide my career, like, where there's like that, there's no that particular form of respect isn't there, if you know what I mean. Whereas Shakur Stevenson views Top Rank, Todd DeBuff, Bob Arum, and those guys as like different type of figures, like authority figures and stuff, where he knows, like, okay, I can't disappoint these guys, or I got to do these. These guys are looking out for my career or something like that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I could see that. You can see on those Showtime All Access that he kind of looks up to Floyd, but unfortunately, Floyd and Leonard Ellerbe can't be there 24/7 with him. And like you touched on during the All Access, is he still goes back to where he lives. He still classes all those guys as friends, and rightly or wrongly, that kind of leads him astray. And I think a lot of people know that I think him and Floyd fell out. There was all those rumors about why him and Floyd fell out, which we can't touch on during the podcast. But
yeah, no, I know, but it is what it is. It is what it is. But we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, Stevenson, if he did move to Vegas, it's a pretty respectable move for him in terms of his career, because he's like, hey man, I'm serious. Like, and I'm sure Top Rank told him, like, look, move to Vegas. We'll hook you up here. Obviously the kid's talented. Moving on. Also this past Saturday, from the Wembley Arena in London on DAZN here on the USA. And where was it? Was it on DAZN in the UK too, or no? No, it wasn't, right?
No, it's on Sky Sports.
Sky Sports, right?
It was freely available on Sky Sports, YouTube. They put this card everywhere.
Oh, sweet. Katie Taylor remains undefeated with a 10-round unanimous decision win over Miriam Gutierrez, who suffers the first loss of her career. Taylor retains her WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO and Ring Magazine lightweight world titles. All right, Mike. Katie Taylor, best female fighter in the world today, or what?
Yeah. She's the self-anointed GOAT, greatest woman of all time.
Whoa. Yeah, Clarissa Shields going to be pretty mad at you for that, Mike.
I think if they could fight, obviously they can't because the weight divisions are quite far apart. I think Katie Taylor smokes her, to be honest with you.
Whoa.
She just seems such more natural boxer. She seems like she has a little bit more pop. She seems, faster, kind of, maybe takes it a little bit more seriously than Clarissa Shields does. And in this fight, I think Miriam Gutierrez, she got herself into she was a mandatory contender for the title, but you could see from round one that she was seriously outmatched. But she was so game. She came to fight. In the round 10 or 11, you thought maybe the referee could have stopped it because she was probably lost every single round. but fair play to her. You know, she saw the final bell. She was very respectful. You know, she helped Katie Taylor put the belts. They kind of held the belts together and took a photograph and stuff like that. She's a big advocate over in Mexico for domestic violence. It was really good. In fact, every single challenger on this card, all really, really game. All came to fight. There was no real kind of like easy knockovers. All really good contenders.
So you give Eddie Hearn the credit for putting these matchups together, huh?
Yeah, it surprised me. Obviously, I watched it because we watch everything because of the podcast and stuff like that. But, you know, I wasn't expecting too much out of this card and because there wasn't too many huge names on there.
Right.
But yeah, I actually really enjoyed it, to be honest with you.
Fair play to Eddie Hearn and Katie Taylor. Now they're. I think the only matchup that makes sense is the one that they were almost made the last time is against Amanda Serrano. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think so because Serrano has power, whereas sometimes I think Katie Taylor, like when she fought Persoon and sometimes during this fight against Gutierrez, she kind of threw caution to the wind and got tagged quite a lot because I think she kind of realized that she could take, you know, Persoon's power and she could also take Gutierrez's power.
Right.
With Serrano, not so much. I don't think so, depending on what weight they fight at. But that's really the only fight to take. And whether Serrano's ducking her or what, I don't know. Obviously, listening to Eddie Hearn and Lou DiBella, you know, the truth's somewhere in the middle. So, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully we need it because, you know, she's another one who she's kind of completed that division. You're just looking at legacy fights.
Right. Yeah. But I think that's the only fight that makes sense for either of them. You know, match them up and kind of see where it goes. Especially if you can get fans in attendance for that fight, like in New York or something like that. Like I feel like you can probably get a good turnout for something like that. You know, like
in New York, you've got a lot of obviously, you know, Irish out there, and a lot of she's from Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of Puerto Ricans in New York.
Yeah, so I think New York would be the perfect place.
Yeah, I think it could win, or even if it's like a co-main to like another, like a supporting other main event or something like that, like so they can all make more money, you know. But I mean, we'll see. But I think that's the only fight that makes sense for either of them. You know, like they almost made it last time, right? But then there was like money issues, and then they were all talking crap about each other. And then Serrano started talking crap against Lou DiBella. She's like, "Oh, I was never told they contacted this person." She's like, "Lou DiBella, what the hell's going on around here?" And then they started going back and forth. I was like, "What the hell?" They're doing all their negotiations on Twitter. It was wild. It was wild. But moving on, Terry Harper also on this card gets the 9th round TKO over Katrina Thanders. I don't know if it's Katharina Thanders, and retains the WBC and IBO super featherweight world titles. What'd you think of Harper's 9th round TKO, Mike?
Good stoppage by the referee. You can see that she was, you know, considerably down, probably lost pretty much every single round to Terry Harper. So there was kind of why carry on with the abuse, you know, that she was getting. Terry Harper, I thought it was a good performance from her. She said, well, she put a picture on. Actually, she broke her hand, I think, in the 4th round. So after that, she kind of just relied on moving and using her jab. Obviously, you know, styles make fights. And in this fight, she looked a lot better than she did when she, you know, maybe lost to Natasha Jonas. And I think everybody really, I know she's talking about unifying, but really she should have given Natasha Jonas another fight after, you know, people were pretty split about that fight. A lot of people thought Natasha Jonas really should have taken the titles that day. But obviously, you know, Michaela Mayer from Top Rank is making a lot of noise online about fighting Terry Harper. So maybe Terry Harper's, you know, past that fight, or maybe they're going to come round and, you know, have that British title fight after they've chance to unify. Because, you know, Matchroom also signed up Maeva Hamdusij, and they also recently signed Hyan Mi Choi, who I didn't realize actually trains out of India.
Oh, what the hell?
She trains with Chocolatito's trainer, Caballero.
Joel Diaz. Oh, Caballero. Oh, it's not even Joel Diaz anymore. What the hell? That's wild.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Just a female Asian champion out of China, trains in India.
How crazy, huh? I'm telling you, man, L.A., Southern California area, they show up, man. This is where you get all your... I mean, was it Lee Selby was the one who told us, like, or at least confirmed it, even though we knew it for a while, where he's like, I come out here to train all the time because, like, the sparring and everything, like, you can't get that back home. Yeah. He's like, this is where it's all at. This is where you get the best work. So everybody comes here from the desert to LA to in the Inland Empire, wherever, there's reputable trainers and boxing work, if you will, at different areas of Southern California, which is crazy. That's what pushed show up. That's crazy. Crazy. I was thinking about like somebody from China coming all the way to Indio.
That must be such a dramatic change.
That's wild, huh?
Just desert, and it's about, 110, 120 degrees, which is about 40-something degrees for the people in the UK.
That's wild. Moving on, Rachel Ball gets the 10-round unanimous decision win over Georgina Guanini. I hope I said that right. This is for the interim WBC Super Bantamweight title. What'd you think about Rachel Ball's unanimous decision win, Mike?
People have really split on this on Twitter. Rachel Ball was throwing a lot. It kind of reminded me of the Lee Selby one, where I thought Lee Selby won, but a lot of people were saying that Ferocious Kambosos, his kind of counter-punching was, scoring the more effective punches and, taking down the health bar if we were converting them into, fighting characters on a computer. Rachel Ball threw a lot, missed a lot. I thought Georgina, threw a lot, kind of countered really, really well with that right hand over the top. You could see she was obviously, very skilled, even though she came in, overweight. I thought the scorecards were favored heavily in Rachel Ball's favor, like far too much. I thought it was a lot closer fight than that. Maybe one I'd have to watch back. I thought maybe Georgina maybe snuck it, but you could see they were probably going to give it to the home fighter, since they're trying to kind of put her back in line to face Shannon Courtney later down the line, since she seems to be the golden girl of matchroom boxing. I thought it was funny how that Rachel Ball was supposed to fight Ebony Bridges for the WBA. Georgina Guiani weighed in over the weight, so they took off the WBA title, and then out of nowhere the WBC just put an interim title in there, even though the WBC is not about money.
You seem so surprised about that move, Mike.
Out of nowhere, because I was like, this is a WBA fight, and then I was like, why the hell is there a WBC belt in there? But I don't know.
You seem so surprised about something like that, Mike.
Mm-hmm. Good old Mauricio.
Like it's never going to happen again, or it's not. Hey, you got to give it to him. We're kind of going sidetrack on the whole WBC thing. Like the guy does, like they get criticized for all these crazy things that they do, belts, new weights, whatever. But he doesn't shy away from the media. He gives interviews and he takes the heat. And people might not like his answers, but he went on Boxing Social, he went on some other outlets and gave interviews about the whole new weight class or whatever. I'm not even going to mention it, but I don't want to mention the name at least. But the guy, he runs to the fire, and he might give answers that obviously people don't like, but he talks to the media even when it's it's about criticism and stuff. It's you got to give him credit for that. It's pretty crazy because people would be like, nobody would kind of blame him if he didn't want to talk about it.
No, exactly. Yeah, you have to give him props for, standing up there and taking the questions from the media. And then obviously our buddy over at Boxing Social, he doesn't shy away from the hard questions.
Nope, not at all. Moving on, Jack Cullen gets the 10-round unanimous decision win over John Doherty. Cullen was actually down in the first round and still ended up with the win. How'd you see this fight?
A lot of people were picking Doherty to come in there and blow him out, but I think people kind of missed that. Jack Cullen had been in there with a lot of good fighters. Felix Cash, Zach Chelly, John Harding Jr. So you could just see that he'd fought at a much higher level, whereas John Doherty coming into this fight, obviously he was only 9 fights into his pro career. But he'd only fought, I think, 2 people with winning records. And so, you could see that a lot of other people had kind of just got blown out of there, and how much had he learned. Whereas, Jack Cullen had been in there with those more seasoned fighters and was, in my eyes, just a little bit kind of old manned him a bit. You could see early on, John Doherty just kind of ran at him, caught him early on. Some people thought it was kind of a push, but I think he kind of clipped him just as he was going down. Jack Cullen got up slowly but surely, kind of worked his way back into the fight, and very strange that he's a 6'3" super middleweight who you would kind of like Fonfara, who you would expect to use his size advantage and just keep him off on a jab. Nope, exactly the same as Fonfara, where he just kind of invites him in, and he's very good at working the inside work for somebody who's huge at that weight. But he was kind of lucky last time as well when he fought Zach Chelly, because I think they gave that as a draw, where I thought Chelly won that. But back to the drawing board for John Doherty, just kind of needs to I would say, clean those edges. He kind of was a little bit relied upon just being bigger and stronger than a lot of people so far. So I think he just kind of needs to polish himself up a little bit and then come back. He's still young, only 10 fights into his career, so he can still, come again.
Isn't Callum Smith like 6'3", super middleweight too?
Oh, he's huge. Yeah, I've met him. I saw him in Vegas when Liam Smith fought Vargas when his ear blew up.
Right.
He's huge at that weight. Yeah, I don't know how he makes it.
That's wild. Yeah, he's a big kid. Rounding off this DAZN card, Ukashir Farouk gets the 14th win of his career with the unanimous decision win, 10 round over Angel Aviles for the vacant. Damn, these alphabet titles, Mike. WBA Continental Bridgerweight Bantamweight Championship. I don't know. I just added all that stuff. What do you think about Farouk's decision win?
Class. Cash Farouk, class. Big fan of his. Has been since I saw him kind of on the British scene. I thought he beat McGregor when they had that big Scottish dust-up a while back. You could see early on that he was just too skillful for Aviles, and I think this was the first fight on the card that I watched, and you could just see early on Aviles was just one of those Mexican fighters was just going nowhere. Farouk was just teeing off at him, probably won pretty much every single round, but Aviles just kept coming. And, I think this is why, people like Lee Selby tell us that they come over here to fight, the tough, Hispanic fighters, because they can just give them body shot after body shot and stuff like that, and they just don't go down. Whereas, they're paying for sparring in the UK and they just can't take it. So
it's wild. That's
one thing that he's told us before. But good fight for Farouk. You can see that obviously he got a lot of rounds in, he did the full 10. And onward to bigger and better things. I know that McGregor said that he was going to pick up, hopefully, the European title, and then he would give him a rematch. So that would be good. I'm not too sure whether they'll still have the Commonwealth, the British, and the European all online for that fight. But, let's hope so, because the first one was a really good, close fight. I think a lot of people was kind of split on who won that out of Farouk or McGregor. So great British fight, though, for later down the line.
Later down the line, fight previews this upcoming Saturday, the 21st of November, from the Wembley Arena in London on DAZN. Conor Benn, 16-0, goes up against Sebastian Formella, 22-1 for the WBA Continental Welterweight. Damn it, Mike, another belt. All right, Ben Formella, what's your preview on this? What's your take, Mike?
Big step up for Conor Benn, really, because, a lot of people were shouting him out from around the British scene. And, a lot of people would just kind of, bounce off, I think, the Conor Benn name, if they got the fight, probably be a big payday. But for Conor, for somebody that didn't have a lot of amateur experience and was kind of learning the game in the pro ranks and had a couple of, wobbly fights early on, to fight somebody that just fought Sean Porter for the WBC. And I remember you were saying, nobody has an easy ride against Sean Porter, but Formella took him 12 rounds. That shows Formella knows his way around the ring. So this really, I think, is going to be a bit of a test. Formella may not have that name, but that showing he gave against Sean Porter, he definitely knows what he's doing in there.
No, right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who have forgotten that Formella fought Porter. Yep. That's the only loss he has in his career. And going 12 rounds with somebody like Porter for as much pressure as he puts on you, and he's just kind of smothering you the whole time.
Also, he picked up the IBO title in, I think it was January this year, against Roberto Ariaza, who you might remember, Danny, from the Thompson's boxing cards.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he was similar style to Conor Benn, because Conor Benn, unless he's kind of, managed to change over the time, he kind of relies a lot on being bigger, stronger, and fitter than his opponents, rather really than having that boxing finesse, because he came to the game so late.
Right.
And is that going to be enough to face somebody like Formella? Formella is a European fighter, German fighter, so he's not really been in there with a lot of the biggest names, but in the fights that he has done against Roberto Arriaza and Sean Porter, he hasn't done badly.
Nope. Yeah, that's definitely an intriguing matchup. Kind of gives you a real measuring stick on these two, especially for Conor Benn. So definitely an intriguing matchup. Also on this card, Fabio Wardley, 9-0, goes up against Richard Larde. Latte. What do you think about this matchup?
Good fight for Fabio Wardley. Richard Latte, obviously, he's been in there recently with Gorman, and then also before that was in with Daniel Dubois. So he's become a little bit of a kind of like a heavyweight journeyman over here. But if everyone can remember when he fought Daniel Dubois, he caught Dubois and kind of rocked him a few times and kind of just stood in the middle of the ring and just traded blows with Daniel Dubois, which, most people wouldn't want to since he's such a beast.
Yeah.
He fought Gorman, didn't look as good against Gorman. Gorman is kind of technical, but did come in, substantially overweight. So kind of maybe his stock dropped a little bit when in that fight against Gorman. Wardley, he'll come in shape. He's pretty game. Good kind of measuring stick, I would say, for Fabio Wardley. Good step up for him. He was another one who kind of came to the pro game kind of late. But yeah, should be a good challenge. I could see Wardley, winning. Latte kind of maybe has got into that journey mode kind of model where he kind of just shows up to lose. He doesn't necessarily show up to win. He kind of just gets into like second or third gear and just kind of stays there. Like, he kind of realizes like, I'm not here to win. But definitely a good step up, and it's a kind of a name for Fabio Wardley's record.
Right. Rounding off that card, Alan Babbage, 5-0, goes up against Tom Little. Alan Babbage, how many times has he fought this year? I feel like we've talked about him multiple times.
This, I think, will be the third since he kind of hit the scene in fight camp with his Alan Babbage, the Savage persona. So, this was kind of another step up fight for him. Tom Little, fair play to him. If you look at him, he kind of knew that he was going to be the next guy in line for Alan Babbage. Got himself in great shape, lost a load of weight, looks like he's been training hard. I think he realizes that, Alan Babbage is kind of a little bit raw, a little rough around the edges. Yeah. So I think he thinks that this could lead to some bigger paydays for him. So he's taken this 110% professionally for once. So this, Tom Little, he's kind of surprising because he plays that joker role, but in some fights when he turns up in shape, he's kind of skillful, knows his way around the ring, and he is good. He just sometimes doesn't, take it seriously outside of the ring, and that obviously, lead to some bad performances. So I could see him shocking people here,
right,
and winning this if he can just stay away from, Babbage's right hand, which is kind of all he relies on. He just kind of comes out with like a butter bean. He's kind of like 4 rounds. He's probably good for 4 rounds and just comes at you. So it should be fun, though. It'd be a fun fight.
Babbage the Savage. That's a pretty cool nickname. News and notes of the show. Canelo versus Callum Smith, reportedly in the works for possibly December 19th somewhere in Texas. They're talking about Cowboy Stadium. This is just that supposedly it's being negotiated or looked at. It's not official yet, of course, at least as of this episode that we're recording. Callum Smith, like I said, Callum Smith is like 6'3", super middleweight. You said you've met him in Las Vegas. He's a pretty big guy. You don't know how he makes 168 pounds. What do you think about this matchup? And you can start wherever you want, but if the Canelo literally goes back to DAZN after he just got out of his contract with Golden Boy and DAZN, how crazy is that?
I don't think it's overly crazy because I think we all know that he wants his way out of the Golden Boy contract so he can just really pick and choose the biggest purses for the rest of his career.
Right.
And I always thought that the Caleb Plant rumor was kind of a little bit off the ball because we knew that obviously, he was supposed to fight a British opponent in Easter, which looked like it was going to be Billy Joe Saunders because DAZN wanted to use that to open up the European British market when DAZN started there. DAZN is scheduled to start, I think the the 5th of December in the UK.
Right.
So to try and get Callum Smith and Canelo, on the 19th in the first month of DAZN hitting the UK makes sense. So they can throw some money at Canelo, hoping that, that will bring in subscribers. And what bigger fight can you do than, Canelo, Callum Smith? It's a good test because if you look at it, and Callum Smith has all the physical, advantages. So it is one of those ones where you kind of, if you're a fan, you're like, well, Callum Smith's a lot bigger, got a bigger reach. He's got some world titles. He's undefeated. Perfect name on paper as an opponent for Canelo and also for DAZN to bring in subscribers.
Yeah, and he's got the WBA super middleweight
Ring
world
magazine
title and Ring magazine. So there you go. You can't. I don't know how people can go against Canelo not being pound for pound, especially when he's fighting these way bigger guys who are world champions and Ring magazine champions. This guy's he's fighting these guys and he's beating them. So I don't know. I think that's an interesting matchup. I think it's also interesting that Ryan Garcia, Luke Campbell was postponed or whatever because Luke Campbell got COVID. And now supposedly, I'm telling you, I think that was all planned. I don't know. It just seems like it was very convenient. Ryan Garcia trains with Canelo. He trains there in San Diego. They're always around each other. He's already made it known that he wants to fight on his undercard.
Eddie says he can't. That was raised in an interview, I think, on Boxing Social, and Eddie was saying that the Ryan Garcia Luke Campbell fight can't go with the Canelo Callum if made because that's a Golden Boy show, and this would be a Matchroom boxing show.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because I did think the same thing. I remember texting you about it, but Eddie said on Boxing Social with Rob Tebbett that he can't because that's a Golden Boy show. So that will probably move to December 19th or maybe even January, depending on if the Canelo Callum Smith fight's made.
I mean, honestly, it's in DAZN's best interest to keep both of those fights separate from each other, have them be their own main event because then they can secure people to be subscribers in 2 different months. Yeah, so,
exactly.
It's better for them just to keep it because then some people are going to be like, over here in the States, it's $20 a month if you do it monthly, or if you pay $100 for the whole year, it's $100, which comes out to be $8 a month. So if people are just like, well, I want to watch this fight this month and I want to watch Garcia Campbell next month, I'm gonna pay $40 and I'll just pay $100 for the whole year and hopefully they give me more after or something like that. People will make decisions like that. So I think I thought I didn't see that Eddie Hearn interview, but that's a really good point. So it's in their best interest, DAZN's best interest, to keep those events apart. Dave Allen just recently announced his retirement this weekend. We were talking about it off air. We shared a video of where he's sparring Alexander Usyk, and then he gets hit by Usyk, and he's kind of out on his feet. You want to describe it a little bit more, Mike?
Yeah, obviously this morning, Dave Allen did an interview with Kugan Cassius saying that he was retiring and gave one of the reasons was, he just after the David Price fight, he kind of thought himself lucky that he didn't have any, lasting damage, and then he fought Usyk. Usyk was sparring for the Trezora fight, which just happened. He kind of is sparring Usyk. He puts a video up and where he gets caught by a left hand from Usyk. He's kind of out on his feet. Says that he kind of snores for a couple of seconds. He then kind of wakes up, finishes the round. Luckily and respectfully, Usyk being the really nice guy that he is, he didn't take advantage of this. Because how many times have we seen in sparring videos, which sometimes fighters post, where they knock somebody kind of out on the feet and then they just take them out, and then they post it on social media, thinking it's cool, thinking it's funny. Whereas Usyk for the rest of the round just kind of moved away, actually kind of caught him when it first happened and kind of helped him on his feet. Yeah. And then for the rest of the round, there was only a few seconds left, to be fair, and kind of moved away, kind of just watched him essentially. And then Dave Allen said that he would kind of, for the next 30 minutes, kind of blacked out,
That's wild.
Not to the floor, but just couldn't remember what happened. And then he said about 30 minutes later, he's kind of packing his bag at the end of sparring. Then he kind of comes round and can kind of remember what happens. And he said that when he was chatting to Eddie hearing about opponents for this coming weekend because he was supposed to be on this card.
Right.
He kept saying no to every single opponent that Eddie was offering him. And Eddie was, hey, what's happening? Dave, like, it's not like you. Normally you'll say yes to anybody. You fought Dylan White, you fought Luis Ortiz. And then it just dawned on him, you know what? I don't want to get punched anymore. And, I think I want to retire. And, Dave Allen is a great example of somebody that had, limited ability, maybe British level ability, but he made himself into a pay-per-view star. He kind of headlined with David Price, and it just goes to show that you don't necessarily need the skill of, like an Anthony Joshua and stuff like that. If you can relate to the fans in this day and age, and if you can get over on social media, you can make good money. Dave Allen has made substantially more money than his ability alone would give him. He's got a couple of houses like he touches on, and he'll probably be okay. He's got to work, he says, when he retires. But, when you hear people moaning like Heather Hardy about like equality and stuff like that, that's not how the boxing game works. It's putting bums on seats. Look at Roman Chocolatito, like one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world. Unfortunately, fights at super flyweight, gets paid very little because of that's not an attractive weight division. Dave Allen, very limited ability, but people can relate to him because of his mental health struggles, like his very likable kind of guy next door, like funny persona that he puts across on social media has elevated him to, astronomical pay levels above
it's crazy
what he really deserves in terms of ability. And, I don't think that's something Heather Hardy deserves, It's just, how it is. It's not like you're a boxer, I'm a boxer, we should be paid the same. It's not like you work in an office, we work next to each other, we both do the same job. Yes, we both should get paid the same. That's not how the boxing business works. And Dave Allen is a prime example of that.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, like you said, like, if you kind of look at the overall picture, you don't need a world title to be able to make a living and make some money in the boxing business, at least. Like, look at that. Like, he's a prime example of that. He's a prime example.
Look at the guy that he trains, Danny Morrell. Danny Morrell was the opening fight on the IFL TV for the MTK card the other day.
Right.
12,000 people watched that live on IFL TV. That was him turning pro, and that's down to like, thanks to Dave Allen and him, always been on social media. They're always on Instagram. They're always posting stuff. People can relate to him. He kind of showed that he was nervous before his fight. That was breaking like IFL TV records for, that where that was placed on the card. That was the opening fight. That was the curtain raiser. How many fights have we been to ringside where you go to the curtain raiser? There's the dude's family. That's it. There's nobody else in there. And he had 12,000 people on IFL TV.
And Bob Arum.
Yeah, good old Bob.
Dave Allen, man. Well, if this really is the end, good luck to him. Good luck to him. He obviously came in and he didn't let boxing control him. He controlled the sport and made some money. So, good luck in retirement and but we know how this game works. Sometimes when there's something lucrative on the, they might pull you back in. Sometimes they come back in. Which leads us to, well, I'll talk about this first. Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. coming up. I hasn't really been getting that much press. They did a lot of press at the beginning. I think the week of, I think you're going to see a big media blitz for this, I think.
Yeah, obviously next week will obviously be, Sunday the 22nd. So that'll be the card that we're previewing. Also, the big fight for that weekend, the big professional fight for that weekend is Daniel Dubois, Joe Joyce. Hopefully a third time of asking. We don't get, a coronavirus or anything like that because that's, just a clash that we've all been waiting for. So, wrap them up in cotton wool, please. Don't let anybody near them for this last final week because we want to see that.
Yeah. But whatever. I forgot until we talked about it just before the show started. The Dubois Joe Joyce fight is coming up. That's one of my favorite matchups of this whole year so far. I hope it produces the action that people are expecting and behind the hype and all that stuff. I hope it does. I really hope it does. Do you think it will?
I think so, because they both got good chins. From what we've seen so far with Joe Joyce, literally the juggernaut, nickname is perfect. We've seen him hit a few times and he just keeps coming forward like a robot. Daniel Dubois has got caught pretty cleanly by Richard Latte. He seems to have a good chin. So, yeah, I think it's going to take a lot to get these guys down.
Yeah, it's a juggernaut. That's a crazy nickname. I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think there's ever been anybody that really had that nickname. At least anybody who's prominent. But the juggernaut, he just doesn't stop. But wrapping up here this week's episode, Mike, before we sign off once again this week, let our people and our listeners and fans know where they can find us.
At the Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And, if you join us next week, we'll be reviewing all the fights we just spoke about and, previewing the Daniel Dubois, Joe Joyce card. And, we'll obviously go over Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr.
Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. So once again, for my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.